Okay, welcome back, and always honored when we get a few moments to spend with Ruthie Blum, and a former advisor in the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She's an award-winning columnist and senior contributing editor to the Jewish News Syndicate, and the co-host with the Israel Undiplomatic there on JNS TV. The website is JNS, which is JewishNewsSyndicate.org, JNS.org. Ruthie, good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, Perry.
Wow, so much going on over there. Let me just jump ahead a little bit. How is the discussion about a potential bombing of the United States over Iran?
Well, there is a lot of media discussion. Obviously, the Prime Minister's office is not sharing the details of what it's been discussing with the U.S. administration, because this is all very hush-hush. What we know is that President Trump gave a serious warning/threat to the Ayatollah regime in Tehran by saying, you guys have a few weeks to get to the table, negotiating table. We don't want military action, but if you don't, then we're going to unleash something you've never seen before.
Okay, so obviously what I'm hearing you also say is the Netanyahu administration and the Trump administration have to be talking behind the scenes.
No question about it, about everything right now, but especially Iran. We know that Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, who was for years Israel's ambassador to the United States, we know is sort of in charge of negotiations with the United States over the ceasefire hostage release deal with Hamas that has really struck an impasse. Now, what we know, though, also is that Dermer must be discussing with both Steve Witkoff and Trump specifically about Israel's role if necessary, in stopping the Iranian nuclear program. You see, America has said again and again that Iran cannot be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons. And Israel has said this all these years as well. But the difference is that for Israel, Iranian nukes pose a direct threat. First of all, Iran is way closer to Israel than to the United States. Second of all, Iran has threatened, and means it, to wipe Israel off the map. So there's no question that Israel, if the United States doesn't act in this way, and if the nukes aren't stopped, Israel will have to do it, because according to various reports, Iran is extremely close to being able to put nuclear warheads on its missiles.
So am I hearing you say that Israel would take the lead in this attack?
Well, what you're hearing me say is that Israel may have to. I believe that Jerusalem and Washington are coordinating this, because this is what we know, all right? This is now what we know that is out in the public, is that President Trump does not want military actions. He's trying to secure peace deals all over the place, especially in the Middle East. We also know that he doesn't want, or Americans don't want, U.S. troops on the ground anywhere. What we also know is that Israel doesn't want the United States to put U.S. troops on the ground in order to defend Israel. So basically, I think that what Israel needs, however, is the kind of weaponry that the United States possesses that Israel doesn't, in order to accomplish this. Now, as I said, this is all speculation, but it's speculation by people, by experts in this field. And again, it's possible that Prime Minister Netanyahu told President Trump that he will wait to see whether Trump's warnings and threats work. And if not, tell him that Israel is willing to bear the brunt of this and take military action. But again, I'm sure that Israel wouldn't do anything without coordinating it with President Trump.
Okay, because the other thing we're reading over here is that some significant military assets, American military assets, have been moved into the area, B-2 bombers and other items, ships and other things that are very much in the zone there, which certainly has got to be intimidating to Iraq. But the president also says that he would probably put tariffs on them that would be devastating. So there seems to be one more move in the middle here for the president to take.
Oh, exactly. And I think that moving those ships and aircraft carriers or whatever, is making his threat credible to Iran. You see, he's saying, look, don't test us, and we're prepared. And we know that Israel is prepared. We don't forget, Israel at the moment is fighting on 7 fronts, and 8 if you count the front of global anti-Semitism, and also internal Israeli strife. But Israel right now is still fighting a war with Hamas in Gaza and with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and making sure that in Syria, the weapons from the toppled Assad regime do not get in the hands of al-Julani, the new head of the Syrian, I wouldn't call it government exactly, but and as I said, we're also getting struck by Houthi missiles every day. That, in fact, the United States has taken on itself to bomb Yemen, to bomb Houthi sites in Yemen. And at the moment, Israel is taking a back seat to that. But Israel is busy on many fronts. And if we have to fight Iran, Iran is the head of the snake after all, and it poses the greatest and most immediate existential danger to the state of Israel.
Okay, so let's take a couple of these one at a time. By the way, since the president has released attack on Houthis there in Yemen, which is so interesting, as you know, the signal flap here with the breakdown there in that chat room. But nonetheless, it wasn't one attack. It's ongoing, isn't it?
It is ongoing. Practically every day we hear about new bombings there, which is why Israel has taken a back seat. Early on in the war against Hamas, when the Houthis began firing missiles, Israel did have to go and bomb the port of Hodeidah in Yemen and things like that. But at the moment, it's the United States taking the lead on that. But that's, by the way, because it's a United States interest. Though the missiles, it doesn't matter. The Houthi missiles are aimed at Israel, right? But the blocking of the Red Sea to commerce is an incredible American interest. So the United States can't allow that.
Okay, so let's come over to Hamas. The ceasefire obviously has been broken, and the penetration into Gaza continues. Give us an update. Okay,
well, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, that any violation of the ceasefire agreement would be answered with military threats. Now, what happened? Hamas for the last going on almost 4 weeks, there was a ceasefire, but no hostages were released at all. And Hamas is playing games with Steve Witkoff by saying, okay, well, we'll release the American hostage named Edan Alexander and 5 dead or 4 dead American bodies. Hamas was hoping that America would say, okay, great, we'll do that. But nobody agreed to this, because what Hamas wanted in exchange was 50 days of a ceasefire and a promise on Israel's part that it would leave Gaza and leave Hamas in power, all kinds of conditions that Israel cannot agree to, nor can the United States agree to those conditions. So they're back to negotiating, but now Netanyahu said, okay, now we're negotiating, you're negotiating with us under fire, not with a ceasefire, but under fire. But even so, Israel is being extremely cautious in Gaza by, first of all, announcing to the population in Gaza where to move out of the way, to get out of harm's way, so that it can bomb targets. And also, Israel is being careful not to harm any of the hostages.
So they know where they are.
Well, there are, I would say we don't know exactly, probably intelligence gathered from captured Hamas terrorists gives an idea. There's also intelligence gathered from released hostages or some sort of intelligence. And soldiers are on the ground there finding, I don't know, DNA of certain dead hostages, etc. But to say we know exactly where each one is, that I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I think we know what general area. And also we have to be careful, even if we know where they are. The danger is that when the terrorists hear Israeli troops approaching the area, they're likely to execute those hostages. So we have to be extremely careful.
But isn't there a little bit of a shift in Israel's thinking, Netanyahu's thinking, we're going to still press forward with this war? That does put at risk the hostages?
Well, yes and no. It depends whom you ask, because I have to say, I know that most of the world only hears the viewpoint of half of the hostage families. That's also all the left-wing TV channels in Israel only interview those families who say, end the war and bring all the hostages home. First of all, that was never a deal on the table. Hamas never agreed to release all the hostages, number one. Number two, there are other hostage families who say, no, the only way to get Hamas to release those hostages is by putting more military pressure, by squeezing them, by not entering any more humanitarian aid, by shutting off the electricity, by shutting off their water. They need to be scared. They need to feel pressed. And then maybe they will agree, A, to release the hostages, and B, to agree to a deal whereby they're allowed to leave Gaza. The leadership, maybe that's part of the negotiation, whether they'll be allowed to stay alive and leave Gaza or not. The trouble is that so far everything has been sort of in Israel's court. We have to put it in Hamas's court, which is to say, to make Hamas feel pressured, not Israel pressured. We're supposed to be the victors. We are the victors, but Hamas is behaving like the victor.
One other quick question, Ruthie. We've seen some reports where the Palestinians are protesting against Hamas in Gaza. Is that real?
Well, I'll tell you something. It is and it isn't. All right. It is real that many Gazans are fed up with Hamas, and rightly so, because Hamas really is responsible for the devastation that is in Gaza. Not all over Gaza, mind you. There are places in Gaza where there are markets open and people's homes are intact, etc. But where there is rubble, etc., it's true, the Gazans do hold Hamas responsible for starting this war and not realizing what was going to befall the Strip. However, make no mistake, those Gazans, now, first of all, Hamas is interested in having them show the protests. How do we know that? Because if Hamas weren't interested in it, it would have executed every single person who dared step out in the street. That we know. And so far, they've only killed one to sort of use as an example. Now, what we know is that Hamas is pretending, saying, you see, we also have disagreements in Gaza. We also, as if to show the West that Gaza is a normal country or something. But don't make no mistake, those Gazans protesting, they would kill any Jew they found today as well. This is not anything about saying, wow, we made a mistake about wanting to annihilate the Jewish state. No, absolutely not. These Gazans, these civilians, many, many of them participated in the October 7th massacre actively. Many participated in the disgusting display of jeering and cheering as hostages were brought to Red Cross vans. They threw rocks at the vans, etc., and attended these vile ceremonies of releasing hostages who looked like they just emerged from Auschwitz, and also with dead bodies. And those Gazans came out with their little children cheering and jeering. These civilians haven't changed their ideology, their jihadist ideology. They're just disgruntled that their house has, been blown up.
Okay, that's a good point. All right, let me take a quick break. We'll be right back. Go to jns.org. That's the Jewish News Syndicate.org, where Ruthie there is a contributing editor. Check it all out. It is the place to go to get the truth of what's going on over there. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Always an honor to have Ruthie Blum with us today, a former advisor in the office of the Prime Minister there, Benjamin Netanyahu, award-winning columnist, senior contributing editor to the Jewish News Syndicate. She's also a co-host with the Israel Undiplomatic there on JNS TV, and the website is jns.org, and there's the picture of the landing site. That's the place to go to get the truth of what's going on there in Israel. Ruthie, so much things to talk about, so little time. All right, so you got the ceasefire is off the table in Gaza in fighting with Hamas. Hezbollah has lobbed a couple of missiles over. That's still a problem. Syria is probably going to get taken over by Turkey. You got the United States now dealing with Houthis in Yemen. I want to go back to Iran, the head of the snake. It could be, and tell me if this is true, that they could be weeks away from a nuclear weapon, which could preempt anything diplomatic.
Oh, absolutely. My only question about this is, how many years have we been hearing that they're weeks away from from nuclear weapons? That's my only caveat here. Right. Periodically we hear that, in 2 months or 2 weeks or whatever it is. All right. So I really don't know. I do know that now everybody is saying that they are extremely close, and that is thanks to the Biden administration's having refilled their coffers that the first Trump administration had emptied through stepped-up sanctions.
So do you think in the middle of all this there's a regime change in the making as well?
Well, it could be. Although, regime change really should come from within and not from without, okay? So there's no point in, Israel or America trying to bring about regime change. What we know is that the Iranian people are extremely disgruntled. They have been protesting. Now, we've seen that many times before. You'll remember that in 2009, when Obama was inaugurated, the Iranian people were taken to the streets. They were protesting the results of their stolen election. And Obama basically abandoned them and said, no, you had an election, we'll respect it. And then he went to the Middle East and he went to Egypt and he addressed an audience of Muslim Brotherhood. He basically was showing everybody, all the allies in the world, that he was considering jihadists friends of America. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is that periodically the protests erupt in Iran, and then the Ayatollah regime guns them down. Now, what's happening today, it looks more encouraging because it seems that they're getting more out of hand, those protests in Iran, than previously, making it more difficult to gun them all down. But again, we'll see. We don't know. I would look at that with cautious optimism, but it doesn't even matter. What matters is that together with, if we take out the nukes and also the sanctions that Trump says he's imposing on Iran, that helps the Iranian people become more angry, because then their economy is terrible. They're suffering also economically, you see. And then that helps them want to overthrow the regime for that reason, not just because the regime is so oppressive.
So I want to ask this question very carefully. If you look at what Israel's done against Hamas in Gaza, certainly has damaged Hezbollah in Lebanon. Houthis have been knocked around. They took out most of the military bases in Syria, and they've even taken out some military bases in Iran.
Yes.
Is Iran kind of a paper tiger right now?
Well, let's put it this way. We certainly hope so, but you can't bank on that. Not a total paper tiger, because if it were, then it wouldn't be necessary for all of these threats and preparing for war, et cetera. Right. It wouldn't be. Right. What we do know is that Israel severely weakened Iran's air defense systems. And what does that mean? It means that flying over there to do anything, let's say, to bomb the nuclear facilities, becomes much, much easier because they have no ability to down our planes. And so I would say you need to take advantage of that. But to say they're a complete paper tiger, I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, but they are weakened.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay. So how much of a threat now is Hezbollah again?
Well, it's far less of a threat. For one thing, all of their leadership, Israel took out all their leadership. Israel also took out lower commanders in the Beeper operation, tons of terrorists in that, and took out tunnels and terrorists and weapons. The trouble is that Israel keeps finding in Lebanon, the idea was when we had that ceasefire agreement, the idea was that the Lebanese government was going to police that, was going to take charge and make sure that Hezbollah didn't come towards the Israeli border, et cetera, and didn't fire missiles. And that is really ridiculous. Nobody really believed that the Lebanese army was going to be able to do it or even want to do it. So it's still a threat, but nowhere near the threat that it was. It's much easier now to take out individual rocket launchers and to fire from the direction that the rockets have been fired on northern Israel. But the fact that they're even still breathing is a problem.
Okay. It's only been 90 days since the Trump administration has been in place, but how much of Israel has been reloaded from the United States?
How much is it? Well, we know a lot. First of all, the Trump administration unfroze all those weapons that the Biden administration had been withholding from Israel. Even though it denied doing so, it turns out that was true. And it was almost like an embargo on sending Israel weapons. So the first thing that Trump's administration did was to say, no, those weapons they're on the way over there. And I believe with additional weapons and bunker busters, things like that.
Pretty amazing. So with the isolation of Hamas inside Gaza, does that include cutting the canals off in Egypt? And I only have about a minute.
Look, I don't know. I think one of the troubles here is the role that Egypt is playing here, because Egypt is playing mediator on the one hand, as is Qatar, and on the other hand, it's been complicit with Hamas to the extent that it looked the other way while Hamas was building all those tunnels and getting weapons and concrete, et cetera, to build tunnels through Egypt, through the Philadelphia corridor. So what is going to happen with, and right now I think Egypt is very nervous because we're demanding that it take a bunch of Gazans into its territory, and it doesn't want to do that.
Not even the children.
No, not even the children, though it did say it would take in some children who needed hospitalization, but yeah. No.
Ruthie, thank you. You're always available to us. We value your time greatly. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, jns.org. That's the JewishNewsSyndicate.org. There's a picture of the landing page. That's the place you can go. Thank you, Ruthie. Stay in there, my friend.
Thank you so much, Perry.